Hi, this is Dr. Paul Reifenrath for Upper Level Canine. Today is going to be a Q&A session. So we've got some questions from some of Karen's clients that I think were really great questions, and we'll dive into them. What foods are toxic and why for dogs? So alcohol, I don't really have to get into that. That's obvious depending on the volume that they consume. We do see some dogs that like a beer once in a while. So, but obviously that can cause some problems. So yeast dough can be a problem. So with yeast dough, if a dog ingests a ball of dough, as the yeast are fermenting, that will produce carbon dioxide gas and it starts to rise. And if that's in the stomach, that's going to cause a really significant bloating situation that's going to probably require emergency abdominal surgery to remove that dough ball. So it has been seen many times where dogs will counter surf and get a dough ball off the counter surface. So chocolate is the next one. This is a little controversial, but the higher the cacao percentage of the chocolate, the more toxic it is. So your high concentration dark chocolate, your baker's chocolate, your cocoa powder, these are all very toxic. So milk chocolate is not very toxic. That's got a very low cacao percentage in it. So if a dog gets into a candy bar or a chocolate chip cookie, it's really not going to be that much of a problem other than the sugar rush that they might get from it. Now, that being said, I have seen dogs that have eaten a whole basket of Halloween candy or taken a whole tray of chocolate chip cookies off the counter and eaten them, and that can be a problem. So we do need to be aware of those situations. The toxic principle of chocolate is theobromine, and this is a relative of caffeine. So depending on the concentration that the dog gets, the symptoms usually we can see are hyperactivity, tremors, seizures, sometimes vomiting and diarrhea, and they can be pretty severe depending on the dog. And this all depends on the size of the dog and the concentration and the amount that they have ingested. And chocolate can be a little bit of a problem, especially if they get into say a big chunk of dark chocolate. Chocolate sits in the stomach and doesn't do very much. It just turns into this gooey mess inside their stomach, so it doesn't move very well, and they just keep getting absorbed. So it's really hard to get them to vomit it back up. It just doesn't come up very well. Sometimes dogs do need what we call a gastric lavage to get that chocolate out of their stomach, which is a pretty big deal. It's usually under anesthesia is flushing out the stomach if they have enough chocolate to cause toxic symptoms. So the other category would be raw, undercooked meat, eggs, or bones. So these can cause a variety of gastrointestinal symptoms and also pancreatitis, especially if we get into a lot of greasy, fatty components of that. Also salmonella and E. coli bacterial infections are at risk. So grapes and raisins are another one. We get a lot of questions about this, got a lot of calls about this. It's suspected that tartaric acid is the toxic principle of grapes and raisins, and dogs aren't really able to metabolize that compound very well, and it can lead to some kidney damage. Now, it all depends on the quantity consumed and the size of the dog, whether it's going to be a problem or not. A single grape or single raisin is not going to be a problem for any dog to deal with. It's typically the volume, the higher volume that can cause problems. This was first noticed several years ago when several dogs in the wine country in California were coming down with kidney failure, and it was found that they were ingesting large amounts of the grape skins after the grapes were processed for wine. So that was kind of a unusual circumstance. We're not going to see that very often, but if a grape drops on the ground, don't worry about it, and the dog eats it, it's not going to be a problem for the dog. So the next category would be onions, garlic, chives, and anything in that family, the allium family. Either fresh or granulated forms of this. Now, this can cause some gastrointestinal distress, but the biggest thing is these can cause red blood cell damage and that can cause anemia. And again, it all depends on how much the dog ingested and the size of the dog. But that can become a serious problem if they become anemic. So best to avoid garlic and onions as much as you can. So macadamia nuts are another one that these can cause neurologic problems. So it's best that just avoid them at all costs around dogs. So just be careful. We don't want them to ingest any amount of macadamia nuts. We're not really sure about the toxic principle of macadamia nuts, but we do know it causes some neurologic problems. So probably a fairly common one that we see is xylitol. So xylitol is an artificial sweetener that is found in chewing gum, candy, toothpaste. So if dogs get into a pack of gum, that can be a real problem. And what xylitol does, it drops their blood sugar very, very low, which can cause weakness, seizures, and coma in really severe cases, and it can lead to liver damage as well. So, keep chewing gum away from dogs and other things that contain xylitol. Also, look at peanut butter too. There are some forms of peanut butter that do have xylitol as an artificial sweetener, so avoid those with dogs. So use peanut butters that have natural sugars in them. So here's another question. Which treats and toys do you recommend, and which would you warn against, and why? So this is kind of a difficult question to answer since there are thousands of toys and treats that are available for dogs, and each dog has their own preferences and their own tolerances of certain things. So my best answer is any toy or treat that the dog enjoys and tolerates and doesn't cause any excessive health risk, let them have it. And I do understand this is a trial and error, trial and success process. So it's just keep an eye on things. Basically, just keep an eye on what they're chewing on and what they're eating. There are several toys and treats that I don't recommend or recommend observation and use with caution. So the biggest one is bones in any form. So bones break teeth. Dogs are very aggressive on chewing these things, and they will bust their teeth on these bones. And that can lead to very expensive dental work, from extractions to root canal therapy and crown restorations. These can get really expensive. So it's best just to avoid bones altogether. Bones also can wreak havoc on the intestinal tract. So when you get into bone chips that are passing through the small and large intestine, I have seen dogs where the bone chips turn into concrete in the large bowel and constipate them with these very sharp bone shards that are poking through their intestinal wall. So it can be a really bad, serious problem. So we recommend just avoiding bones at all costs. Also, the fatty marrow cavity can, if dogs ingest that marrow, which they love because it tastes great, we do see dogs develop pancreatitis and other gastrointestinal illness from that. So the other one is antlers. Now, antlers I don't recommend. Dogs love them, but I don't recommend them because they, just like in bones, they break teeth. They're harder than the teeth, and as the dogs are chewing on them, they'll snap one of their molars off, and or their canine tooth or their incisor teeth. So we just recommend avoiding antlers if you can. We also kind of use caution with dogs that are playing with toys that are made of plastic or rubber. If they bite off a significant chunk off that toy, if they ingest it, that can lead to intestinal obstruction. So usually we recommend observation, and if they are chewing off chunks, just get rid of those chunks, throw them away as quickly as you can. And that includes tennis balls and other rubber balls. So another thought on tennis balls. There are some dogs, golden retrievers, that love to carry around a tennis ball all the time. They become obsessed with tennis balls. So tennis balls, the cover on the tennis ball is very abrasive to the surface of the tooth and will wear down the enamel to the point where it'll expose the pulp cavity and cause dental sensitivity and possible tooth root abscess. So again, use those with caution. So your veterinarian will let you know if those teeth are getting worn down from chewing on a tennis ball. So I also recommend a little caution if dogs are chewing on knotted rope toys. Sometimes they will pull off some of the strings and they will get caught in between the teeth and cause some problems. Also, they can also be a cause of intestinal obstruction too. I've tend to see those happen when they're chewing on those and they've eaten other things like plastic items or something like that, and that's in the stomach, and all these strings from that rope toy get tangled up with other things that might be in the dog's stomach, and that can lead to some gastrointestinal obstruction. So the other thing I recommend a little caution with is pig's ears, cow's ears, cow hooves, cow horns, bully sticks, rawhides, especially the flavored or the colored versions of these. Dogs love to eat them. They taste good, they're fun to chew on, but not all dogs tolerate them, and they can cause some pretty significant gastrointestinal dysfunction, distress. I also watch them carefully when they're chewing on these things, because if they chew off a large chunk of the item and they swallow it, that can cause some esophageal or gastrointestinal obstruction. So I have seen that in some dogs where they bite off a big chunk of rawhide and they try to swallow it and it gets stuck in their esophagus. And that's a very serious problem that needs emergency attention right away. The last question for today is, which is appropriate for wintertime, how bad is salt for your dog's paws? This is not a real common or a serious problem, but it is something that's easily managed. So if you encounter this with your dog when you're walking on heavily salted roadways or sidewalks, some dogs may have sensitive skin and they may develop some skin irritation from the salt or the similar products that are used to melt ice that may cause some skin damage and some skin irritation. So the easiest thing to manage with this is just wash your dog's feet off with a wet towel, or have them stand in the bathtub in some water for a few minutes after walking outside, and then just dry the feet off real well. So it's rarely a significant problem, but I have seen some dogs be affected by this. So we will tackle a few more questions next time, and let us know what your thoughts are. Thanks.